Deep in the woods of the American Midwest, whispers of strange figures have persisted for decades. They call them Melon Heads, creatures with grotesquely swollen heads, said to stalk rural backroads and abandoned buildings. Are they lost survivors of a dark past, or simply the product of human imagination? This is their story. The Melon Heads legend originates from three regions: Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut. Each version shares similar characteristics: a community of disfigured humanoid creatures living in isolation, far from prying eyes. Yet each state weaves its own tale, tying the Melon Heads to the places and fears of its people. In Ohio, the Melon Heads are said to be the victims of a tragic experiment gone horribly wrong. The story tells of a secluded mental asylum where doctors conducted cruel tests on patients, causing their skulls to swell unnaturally. According to the legend, a fire destroyed the facility, and the surviving patients fled into the surrounding forest, where they supposedly live to this day. Meanwhile, in Michigan, the tale shifts. Here, the Melon Heads are said to be the result of generations of inbreeding within an isolated family living deep in the woods. Locals claim these individuals grew increasingly reclusive and grotesque over time, until they became the monstrous figures described in the legend. In Connecticut, the Melon Heads are tied to Dr. Crow, a supposed mad scientist who adopted orphan children only to experiment on them. As the story goes, his experiments caused the children's heads to deform. After Dr. Crow's death, the orphans burned his home to the ground and retreated into the wilderness. While these legends are fascinating, could they be rooted in historical truth? Let's look deeper. In the early 20th century, mental asylums dotted the American landscape, often located far from populated areas. Some of these facilities were notorious for neglect and abuse. Stories of mistreatment, forced experiments, and fires are sadly not without precedent. In rural areas where folklore thrives, the presence of these asylums often fueled speculation. A closed-down institution could easily become the birthplace of ghost stories and tales of escaped patients. The Melon Heads myth may have arisen from these grim histories, reshaped by time and imagination. In Michigan, the legend's focus on inbreeding may reflect social anxieties. Isolated families in rural areas often faced prejudice, and whispers of deformity or strangeness were common. Over time, these whispers could have evolved into tales of the Melon Heads. Like many urban legends, the Melon Heads story grew beyond its origins, spreading through oral tradition, local lore, and eventually pop culture. By the 1980s, the legend appeared in horror movies and novels, cementing its place in the paranormal canon. Today, the Melon Heads thrive in the digital age. Online forums and social media have breathed new life into the legend, with thrill seekers sharing supposed sightings and locations linked to the creatures. Despite the legend's persistence, there's no concrete evidence to support the existence of the Melon Heads. Records of the asylums tied to the tales often reveal no trace of unethical experiments or catastrophic fires. Similarly, stories of isolated families in Michigan and mad scientists in Connecticut lack documentation, rooted more in imagination than fact. The Melon Heads may not be real, but their story reflects something deeper: a collective fear of the unknown and a fascination with the grotesque. These legends show how folklore can emerge from the shadows of history, blending fact and fiction into something timeless. Whether they're misremembered history or pure fabrication, the Melon Heads remain a powerful symbol of humanity's darker fears. They remind us that even in the age of information, some mysteries are destined to endure. And as long as there are dark woods and quiet roads, the Melon Heads will continue to haunt our imaginations.